I think saying yes to opportunities is huge for anybody who has knowledge to share. If somebody comes up to you and they say, I would love to pay you for your knowledge, say, yes, let me get back to you. You don't have to start with a course. That was always the ultimate goal, is that I loved to teach, but you really only need one person to pay you to be in business.
Hey everyone, I'm Haley of Team Teachable, and I'm really excited to kick off Season 3 with Melissa Guller, CEO of Wit Wire. Melissa Guller is a course creator, podcast producer, and the CEO of Wit Wire, where she helps online business owners start and scale their own podcasts. She's produced multiple top 50 podcasts, and you might recognize her as the original host of this podcast, Everything is Teachable, which was featured in Apple's Best New Business Podcasts in 2019. Bigger picture, Melissa loves to teach entrepreneurs. She's helped nearly 2,000 students through Wit Wire's online program so far, and she's on a mission to help more diverse entrepreneurs earn money online doing work that they love.
Welcome to Everything is Teachable, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes to learn how everyday creators have transformed their skills and passions into online courses and businesses.
Once Melissa realized that she could combine her love of podcasting with the genuine joy she found in teaching others, she knew creating courses on Teachable was an easy choice. And as the former head of engagement at Teachable, she made valuable connections and learned top insights from fellow creators that motivated her to transition away from her full-time job at Teachable to a full-time Teachable creator. In this episode, we'll talk about the strategies that helped her get here, the fears she overcame to pursue her entrepreneurial dreams, the power of a private community, and more. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me today. I mean, this is truly like the best passing of the torch episode I could possibly think of.
I know, it's so funny to be on this side.
I know, because not only were you the original host of this podcast, you are also my trusted and endeared colleague at Teachable. And I'm just really, really excited to chat with you, and to kick off Season 3 in this way is really, really special.
Yeah, I'm really honored to be here. It'll be an exciting change, I think, for people to hear a little bit more about my creator story after possibly tuning into a couple seasons of the podcast and hearing about me as the Teachable point of view. So I'm really excited.
Yes, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So your business that you are now doing full time is Wit Wire, where you help fellow business owners start their own podcasts and scale it. So I'd love for you to talk about your early days, how you got started, and what really motivated you to keep going while you were also working a demanding full-time job at the time.
It was a lot. Working at Teachable was my favorite place I've ever worked. I'm not just saying that because I'm on Teachable's podcast. I really enjoyed the creative challenge of helping more online course creators, and I enjoyed everybody who I worked with. But I had always wanted to start my own business. And it kind of came up by accident. I was teaching in-person classes at General Assembly in New York. This is 7 maybe years ago. And somebody came up to me after class and they asked, do you do tutoring? And so I said yes. And then I went home and I furiously Googled rates for tutoring. And then I emailed them the next day and I said, here are my rates, as though I did that every day. And then I was in business. And then a couple months later, somebody asked, do you do consulting? And I said, I'll get back to you with my rates. And then I went home and I Googled, and then all of a sudden I was in the consulting business. And I like to share that story because I think saying yes to opportunities is huge for anybody who has knowledge to share. If somebody comes up to you and they say, I would love to pay you for your knowledge, say, yes, let me get back to you. You don't have to start with a course. That was always the ultimate goal, is that I loved to teach, but you really only need one person to pay you to be in business. So that's how I got started. In-person classes at General Assembly, teaching Excel. I'm a huge nerd, so I really loved it. And then after a few years, I had the itch to continue teaching online. So I have a course on Skillshare. It came before my life at Teachable. Let me be very clear. I highly endorse Teachable for creators moving forward and for business owners. And then all the time that I was at Teachable, I really loved being able to support course creators, but I still had that itch of knowing I wanted to start my own business because I knew I had knowledge to share, but I also really loved teaching. I felt like I had a really good sense of how to simplify things that were very complicated. And it made me a good partner for a lot of very visionary business owners who knew they wanted to, say, start a podcast, but the tech was very intimidating, or just how do I do it? Where do I get started? All these really big questions, imposter syndrome about who am I to start a podcast? These are all things that I knew I could be a good partner for those business owners in. And so putting a course together was just a natural fit. And my goal was always to run my own business using Teachable. And the fact that I'm doing that now full time is a little bit surreal. I mean, I'm only a couple months out on my own, but this has been, I would say like 7 years in a way in the works.
Wow, that is so inspiring and so amazing. And I think that's also a really good segue into talking about online courses for your business. And what was kind of the moment that made you realize, and I know that you said that having your own online business with Teachable was always in the plan, but specifically for courses, what made you realize, okay, this is what I need to do?
There's a lot of outlets to share your knowledge online. Coaching, consulting, freelancing. There are a lot of ways that you can work with people one-to-one. But I knew that I wanted to create a course eventually, not at the beginning, but eventually, because it scales a lot wider. And I mentioned before, I really do love to teach. I felt like my skill set was suited for simplifying all the big, complicated things, putting them into really digestible curriculum, and then critically supporting people as they move through the course. Like, I've been burned by bad online programs. I think, unfortunately, that's a reality that a lot of us are in, is that we've purchased a course and it didn't quite live up to our expectations. And I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to feel like my courses were helping people and that they really were achieving the outcome at the end of the course. Like, I didn't just want to make sales. I wanted to build success stories.
That's, I think, one of the most important parts is really, and I know this is something that we live by at Teachable, just providing a transformation for your students.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what you're doing.
Definitely. And I can elaborate a little on courses versus coaching, because when I did get started in my business, it was important to me that I didn't just jump to creating a course, even though I knew that was the outcome. Like, by then, I had already created and produced the content in Teachable U. For any of you who have been learning through Teachable, that is a project that I produced back in 2018, hard to believe. And hopefully by the time some of you are listening, that content has been helpful for you as you've built out your own courses. But despite all the knowledge, despite all of the teaching I had done, I know that the fastest way to create a course that never sells is to jump right to what you have as the big version in your head. Mm. So by that, I mean, right now I have a course that is all about how to launch a podcast. And it's a pretty well built out course. It actually has a circle community that goes along with it and live weekly group coaching. It's a big program, but that's not how it started. The first version was 20 women who joined, and every week we did a live coaching call. And that's how I did the curriculum the first time, because I think it's so important that you get people to pay you to develop your content instead of developing all of the content before somebody pays you anything. So the easiest way to get started is just with one person. See if you can sell them a coaching package. See if you can sell them a service. And the more that you do that, the more that you work one-on-one with people, you'll start to realize that there are patterns. To me, that's the surest sign that you have a course, is I realized when it came to launching a podcast, for the first couple of weeks, I recommended the same set of steps. And then after that, I had a whole process for producing episodes. It was very repeatable. And so once you start to notice, I'm always answering this question, I'm always doing things in this particular order, that's when you'll start to see that you actually have a system that can be packaged into a course. So that's my maybe biggest tip for aspiring course creators, is even if you love to teach, even if you want to do that eventually, start by simplifying. Either take on just one client or do a small group of even 5 people. It's so valuable for them to get that one-on-one time, and it's so valuable for you to get real experience seeing if your system gets results.
And not only that, but it's an amazing way to get social proof and some amazing testimonials from how inspiring and how much of an impact that you're having on people.
Totally. I think that aiming to get great testimonials should be something that all course creators are thinking about. And not just because they help you sell, although of course it is a great strategy to share testimonials on social media, on your sales pages, in your emails, just absolutely everywhere. But I think the fact that you can get somebody to that outcome is what matters the most. And it doesn't matter how many people you do that for. Even helping 2 individuals is so powerful. And I think it gives you the boost too to know this is working, I'm serving somebody. And I think that it boosts your confidence as a business owner to help somebody get to that outcome.
Definitely. Because I think a lot of people can have a hard time maybe going through the process and maybe viewing the very end result. But it's good to know that you need to take each little step by step, do the smallest thing first, the most realistic thing first, and then just keep it moving. So you gave us the background on your business. You told us about what inspired you to really move forward with online courses. When was the moment that you realized that you were ready to step away from your 9 to 5 to pursue being an entrepreneur full time?
I probably overstayed my welcome a little longer at my full-time job, not only because I really enjoyed it, but I was just so invested in Teachable's success, it made it hard for me to leave. And on top of that, I will say that the pandemic changed my plans. I think that's true for probably everybody. When I started my business a little more formally in 2019, I had it in my head that I was going to work on it for a year and then leave my job. But then about 8 or 9 months later, the pandemic hit, and it kind of seemed like an opportunity where I honestly was not doing much of anything anyway at the time. So I felt like I could utilize my time before and after work to work on Wit and Wire. So when I started, I think the huge benefit to getting started while you have full-time employment is that you don't have to immediately feel the pressure of earning money. So for the first 6 months, I was putting out SEO research blog posts. I was building up a Pinterest following. That's actually still the #1 organic source of traffic for Wit and Wire. I was starting to conceptualize if I wanted to start a podcast for that business because I already had a few, so I didn't know if that was the right move. And overall, I was just kind of exploring those options while I took on a few one-on-one clients. And I think that that worked really well because without that pressure of how do I immediately replace an income, I was able to get a little bit more clarity on which marketing strategies were working. I was able to build up a little bit of a following on my Instagram account, my email list, and I didn't have that pressure. And then when I did decide to release the beta version of the program, I was able to get just a handful of those people just from that audience to join. And they were all really warm leads because I had spent basically 6 months doing nothing but sharing value. So there's so many pros, I think, to overlapping a little bit with your full-time job. And I don't regret staying a little bit longer than maybe I should have. And the reason I say longer than I should have is because in the end, I was working unsustainable hours. I mean, I would get up in the morning and work for 2 or 3 hours on Wit and Wire. Then I would work my full-time job at Teachable. And then I would take a dinner break and then I would immediately start working at Wit and Wire again. And it was not a healthy choice. I knew it wasn't a long-term choice though. So I was able to do that for just a couple of months. And then I put in my notice and I guess the rest is history. But yeah, I can't stress enough how helpful I think it is to start while you have full-time employment and to really use that space to explore what do I enjoy talking about? What resonates with my audience? You don't even have to create any new accounts. You could just start by kind of putting your toe in the water and sharing on your existing social media accounts a little bit about your expertise, a little bit about your passions, and just kind of see what sticks. And something that I would recommend to anybody who's in those very early stages is to actually talk to people who would be your ideal customer. So for me, it would be reaching out to say, hey, I'm thinking about starting a course about launching a podcast. If that sounds like you, I'd love to chat. Absolutely no pitch. I'll even give you a Starbucks gift card. I did that for a handful of people. And then they just got on a call with me, which I recorded and transcribed. And I asked them about what their challenges were and what they had tried and what they hadn't tried. And that information was so helpful because I had kind of forgotten some of the things that I know. Like as experts, I think there's this almost blind spot that we have to the things that we had to learn in the very beginning. So those calls were invaluable and shaped the program and the curriculum into what it is today. So yeah, if you're full-time, I would say go for it. Take small actions and just kind of let that momentum build while you are still getting paid by an employer.
Definitely. And I just really appreciate the fact that you brought up about not needing to go full force with your business if you're kind of just getting started, because that can, of course, be so overwhelming and really intimidating to think that, okay, I have to have this all done now And that's like not realistic at all. Even if you didn't have a full-time job, it's not realistic to just think that you're going to have it all done in 24 hours and it's an overnight success. Like it takes time, it takes effort. So it's good to share that message, I think, for sure.
Definitely. And in addition to there being no such thing as an overnight success, I also think that if you jump all in, which is something I definitely respect if that's you, I do think it puts your back up against a wall to maybe say yes to clients or jobs that are not exactly what you want. And again, I don't think that there's anything wrong with the hustle, anything wrong with finding work where you can take it. But if you do put in a little bit more of that groundwork to figure out not just what am I good at, but what do I want to charge? What are the packages that feel right to me or the courses that feel right for me? I just think that utilizing the space as a full-time employee in either nights, evenings, or weekends to kind of test the waters will help you figure out the direction of your business and help you find work that long-term you will really enjoy doing.
I completely agree with that. And, as you transitioned out of your 9 to 5 and you really went for this opportunity to spread your wings, as a cliche way of talking about it, to be your own boss, I'm sure that there had to be some fear behind that. And I would love to hear from you about kind of what were those fears like for you and how did you overcome them?
I think a big part of being an entrepreneur, no matter what your topic, no matter even if you're an online or an offline business owner, is that you just have to be really comfortable with things going wrong. If you look out into the world, a lot of people are doing a lot of great marketing strategies, sales strategies, and it's easy to want to emulate what a lot of people are doing. And I do think it's smart to research and to kind of see what's out there and to be creatively inspired by those choices. But I can't tell you how many strategies other people use that I tried that did not work for me at all. And then I'm doing some things that I'm guessing wouldn't work for everybody. And as a business owner, you're just always deciding between two good ideas. It's not about, oh, this is a bad strategy and this is a good strategy. Let me pick the good strategy. You're just going to be presented from all angles with competition, with people telling you this is the way, that's the way. And I think just kind of keeping your head in those situations, keeping calm is really hard. And then when I left my full-time job, the biggest fear, which I'm sure everybody shares when they make a big leap like that, is, can I really support myself doing this? Like, can I earn money not only to support my income that I've now lost, but also I have business expenses. So I can't just replace the salary. I actually have to replace a significantly larger amount of money. And I'll say, just as somebody who's been in this industry for a while, I do think it's kind of frustrating to see so many people talking about their 5-figure launches, their 6-figure businesses, because nobody is talking about how much they're spending. And to me, that's such a big difference. And I want to learn from the creators who are taking home money. I want to learn from the creators who have a life outside of work, who have the money to support that life. And a big reason I wanted to do a course business is also because I have family all over the US. I wanted to be able to have a life where I could travel to be with them, where I could actually spend time with them and not be confined to an office or a set of work hours. And so to me, having a course business, being a course creator means freedom, but I think in a more location freedom kind of way, in a how I spend my time kind of way, even just the creative freedom to make all the decisions about my business. Like, those are all the pros, but the cons and the fears of, am I going to make money? Are people going to buy this program? I think those are things that we all deal with. And I will say something that I talk about a lot, but is hard to take your own advice sometimes, is I think it's really challenging to look at competitors. I think it's a sign that there's demand. And that's what I tell all my podcasting students. And I believe this is true completely, that if you see other people podcasting about your topic, blogging, doing YouTube channels, selling courses, all of that just validates demand. And I sincerely believe this, but people will buy from you because they like your personality. They like your experience. They'll like your perspective. You have a special something about you just by being who you are. I deeply believe there's enough space for everybody. And at the same time, I'm a human who has the internet and I see what's out there on Instagram. And sometimes it's really hard to see other people succeeding where I feel like all I'm doing is working and where is the money? So it's definitely like an up and down. I think we can all feel that way with our new projects, especially. But I just remind myself that it's a big picture and not a week to week measurement of success that I'm looking at. Like, if this week was better than last week, that's great. But if next week is worse, it doesn't mean that everything I've done up until this point is a total failure. So I think you really just have to zoom out. You have to look at your business in months or years, but then look at your daily focus in terms of days or tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it's so important for people to know and understand that not only can it be a little dangerous to play the comparison game so hard with other people, but also knowing that there's always going to be ebbs and flows with your business, and that is perfectly normal and okay.
In fact, I would say it's expected. Like, I wouldn't recommend that any online business owner goes into it with the goal of, I'm going to get this right the first time, or my goal is to figure out the answer. Like, there isn't an answer. There is not an end to your business. So instead, I would go into it with the mindset that you will adapt and that the version that you're putting out there is your best guess at what's going to work right now. And even in the world of like podcasting, I think is a good example. So many people don't launch a podcast because they're stressed about the name, or if the topic is exactly right, or if the first episode they record doesn't sound exactly like they want. But the truth is, there will be a gap. When you hear your first episode, it's just new for you. You're not going to be a natural because it's a brand new skill. And even for me, I had been teaching for years when I started podcasting, but it still felt totally foreign. Like, interviewing was a totally foreign skill. I had never done that before. And so just show yourself some kindness and remember that no decisions you make are permanent. You can change a podcast name. You can change a course name. You can change anything inside the course. You can change the name of your business. You can do absolutely anything. And I think until you start to put yourself out there, you just won't know what works. So you got to be resilient. Go into it assuming things will change instead of trying to guess at the right answer before you even start.
Definitely. And wow, not only was that great advice for our audience, that was also great advice for me because I'm over here. This is so foreign to me. This is the first episode of a podcast that I've ever done. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And I hope that people show you some love on
Yeah.
Instagram. You can follow Teachable, which Haley does a great job managing.
Thank
and
you.
tell her how great of a job she's doing in her first podcast episode as an interviewer.
Oh, thank you so much. You flatter me, truly. I think that is so essential for people to know, is and knowing that not everything has to be so permanent, and that having the autonomy to change whatever you want to change whenever you feel like it's right to do that is really one of the most beautiful things about having your own business. You get to call the shots when you feel like it's appropriate and necessary to do so.
100%. Nothing is permanent. If there's even just one takeaway from this episode, I think that that's a great one. You can change anything later. And I think most importantly, you can change your mind. Like, you are not making a decision today that you have to adhere to and just keep for years and years to come. So try to think of decisions as what is right for you in the present, and just trust that your students, your audience, like, they'll tell you what they need over time. And the best thing that you can do is just listen and adapt.
Completely agree. And based off of your time working at Teachable and getting to the opportunity to not only connect with so many creators when you were the podcast host, but just in general from your time here, what were some of the biggest takeaways that you've gotten from working with creators who have come from all walks of life?
I would say one of the biggest takeaways I hope people really get from this podcast is that you really can choose any topic. But to maybe take it one step further, I would also encourage everybody to think about who is your audience. Like, if my topic were yoga and my audience were teens, that's very different from having yoga for people with hip pain. So getting real clarity on who you're for, I think, is really important, no matter if you're starting a podcast, a course, or a business. And then I think on top of that, years as though it was so long ago, but a few years ago, I think a big badge of honor for an online course was to say, I have this many hours of video and I have all of these things in the course. But the two things that I think are wrong with that are, number one, assuming that more is better. And number two, assuming that video is the only thing you can include in a course. So should we get into each of those separately, I think
that's a great idea. Let's do it.
Okay, so the first one is about the length of your course being a selling point. I think it's actually the opposite, where as the creator of the course, the biggest kindness that you can show your students is to put effort into making shorter videos and editing out all the information that they don't need. Because students are enrolling in your course because they want to achieve the outcome. They want the six-pack at the end of the tunnel. And if you put too much in their way and you try to give them every single piece of information, they will never make it out of your course. They'll probably feel discouraged because there's so much to watch, and ultimately they won't achieve the outcome. So I think it's important for you as the creator to ask yourself, do they really need this information in order to get to that end goal? And if not, you should cut it, because that will help your students achieve success is if they're only doing the steps that are absolutely critical to that goal. And then even within that, I know for me personally, my attention span in a course for an hour-long video is pretty limited. Like I see that 60-minute mark and I'm just like, ooh, I don't have 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I really like to make shorter videos under 15 minutes, because then if I see a 7-minute video on choosing the right podcast format, that feels very doable. That feels like, okay, I could sit down, I could make progress on that right now. And then in a more literal way, when somebody is looking at your course inside of Teachable, they can see the clear milestones broken out in the course, and then they can see lessons. And by creating those shorter videos, it becomes not only more skimmable, but also a better reference library so that later on, if they want to go back and say, oh, how did Melissa work on that episode production flow? Then they can find exactly that video instead of having a big video about all of pre-production. So I think it makes for a significantly better user experience to think about shortening videos and even cutting out some of that content that might not be useful. So that's the first one.
So good. Love it. This is my favorite part of the episode, I think, so far.
This is my favorite part of teaching. And I think it kind of ties nicely into the next part, which is that courses are about so much more than video. By working at Teachable, I learned that one of the biggest things that holds people back from creating a course is the fear of video. It's the tech. It's putting your face on camera, which I'll be honest, I did not like doing at first. And most of my course does not have my face in it at all. It's mostly just screen flow videos of very basic slides. And to me, that just reinforces the point that people want the value that you're selling, that you're teaching. And it's great if you want to put your face on camera, but it's also not a requirement. But let's even go beyond video.
Yep.
What about things like workbooks, things like community, things like coaching? Those are some things that you may have considered. And maybe they don't all make it into the first version of your course. I really believe that the first version should be pretty simple. Maybe, again, it's like a weekly live event with your 5 students, and you bring your slides and you record it, and then you upload that recording to Teachable, and maybe they have a workbook throughout. That's perfect. As it evolves, maybe then you add in some of the other elements. But the workbook to me, I think, is really important because so many creators are spending time asking questions like, how do I make a beautiful PDF? But in my life, I don't use PDFs. I use Google Docs. So I would much rather have a practical, but maybe, some nice formatted situations going on in a Google Doc that I can actually use, or a Google Sheet or something that's useful. And those are not the kinds of conversations people are having. They're asking like, how do I find graphics? How do I make this nicer? How do I do the formatting? And to me, that'll just end up making you maybe feel frustrated if that doesn't come naturally to you. And possibly it'll end up resulting in something your students aren't going to use. Now, I have a soft spot for the right moment for a PDF. And maybe there's a printable, maybe there's a reference guide, something that sums up the information. I definitely think that you can use them. I'm not here to be a PDF hater. But I would say, think about what you would actually use to achieve your outcome. Probably a simple note, probably a simple template. And then as you look through your course, I think that's the other big missed opportunity that a lot of creators aren't thinking about are templates. So maybe you can have a script, a starting script template. Like for me, it's the emails that I use to pitch guests. I can provide those scripts to students, and that goes a really long way compared to just doing a video. I could also provide some template flows, like maybe my episode prep template. Again, it's the simplest Google Doc. It has maybe a couple different sections of headers with some instructional text. It did not take me long to put together, but it's practical. People actually use it. And then there's design templates. Can you create Canva templates that people can use? What can you do to make that path to your outcome shorter? And then the last thing I'll say is that by far, something that I think most people who purchase any course share is that they're not just joining the course because they want knowledge. They also want the accountability of getting to that outcome as quickly as possible. So something that I do in my courses is I provide a roadmap on different timelines. I have a 30, 60, and 90-day timeline for people to actually take the course. So I help them get through it by saying, okay, if you want to do the 60-day podcast launch, here's what I recommend week 1, 2, 3, and so on. And here is a Trello board, an Asana, and a Google Sheet that you can choose which tool works for you, and you can go for it. So I think giving people not just the knowledge, but also giving them the support to take your course is really crucial.
Definitely. And yeah, I think bringing up the point that people do get stuck so often on the aesthetics, and it's honestly, it's really not as important. Like you said, people need the support, they need the accountability. And not only does making all of these documents more simple for everyone to be able to utilize in a really valuable way, all of these different products, I guess you would call them, are evergreen. Like you could use these over and over and over again. So it will never lose value.
Exactly. And just throughout your creation process, instead of asking yourself, what videos does my course need? I would definitely start by mapping out, what is the end game of this course? What is success? What are the major milestones that somebody needs to hit along the way? And then what is the shortest way I can get them to each of those outcomes? And that's where I think those things like the templates, the time saving, the shorter videos, the cutting out non-critical info, that's where all of that comes in. And I really do think, like I said before, that it's a kindness to save people time instead of just asking yourself, what is the maximum amount of info I could include in this program?
Would you say that it would be a worthwhile piece of advice to give creators to frame their curriculum in a way that they would want to approach taking someone else's course?
Definitely. I mean, if you don't want to take your own course, we got a problem. But I think in a more specific way, if I see a sales page and it says that there's 20 hours of video, my initial reaction to that is, oh God, I don't have 20 hours to watch videos. Like that is not what I want. So on my sales page, I don't list the total amount of videos. Instead, what I say is that it's bite-sized videos under 15 minutes that you can move through step by step and that you can continue reference long after your podcast launches. And then I also talk about the fact that I don't only have videos. I have all these time-saving templates, these scripts. I have all these other elements. And I think that's where the real value comes in, is the fact that it is, again, I'm focusing on what I believe my students want. I believe they want to launch a podcast, and I believe they want to save time. They want to do it right. They want to set up systems so that it's successful long after launch day. And so with that goal in mind, I have to ask myself, well, what do I need to do in order to get them to that outcome? And hour-long videos are just, it's not going to be the thing. It's not going to happen.
It is just, that's way too overwhelming. And not to mention, you're doing kind of yourself a favor as the creator to take some pressure off of yourself to be like, okay, actually, I don't have to sit down in front of a camera and feel potentially uncomfortable to film myself. Because just, working in social media at Teachable, I've seen so many comments and conversations happening around video in general, and it's something that people really struggle with. So if you really think about it, taking the bite-sized video approach really also helps you in the end, because now you don't have to expect for yourself to make hour-long movies for your course. It's so much easier for you to take these smaller chunks and doing yourself and your students a favor at the end of the day.
Such a good point. And let's talk about video a little bit, because in addition to it being way easier to say, I'm going to film this one 10-minute video. Let's say in the future, you need to update part of your curriculum. That's what I'm looking at right now. The podcasting industry is changing pretty rapidly. And so there are parts of my program that I'm recording new videos for. And if I had done hour-long videos, I would have to go in, find a part, edit it out, put something new in. But I'm not doing any of that. I'm just recording the one 5-minute video that needs to be replaced and moving forward. So I think it also makes it a lot easier for you to maintain your own curriculum if you do these smaller lessons that each have one clear, actionable takeaway. And then we got to talk about the video, because like we talked about before, I know it's a huge fear. It is a pain point. The tech, the setup, I don't have a background. I've got a dog running around. I have kids all around me. Like, I know these are huge pain points. And I want to tell people what my videos look like in my course.
Yes, please.
I made one template It's in Google Slides. I use the same font throughout the whole thing, and I use one brand color. I've got one opening slide that says the name of the lesson. And then I had a couple different versions, and I made a little template. I downloaded a template. It's got, one with bullet points, one that's just a graphic, and I think there are 2 others. And every lesson in my entire curriculum is just those slides. And then occasionally also I'll do a demo of something on my computer. And almost none of them have my face. Some of the course curriculum at the very beginning, I come on and introduce myself and give kind of an overview. So I do show my face there because I think that's important to build a relationship. But then starting in the first section on your podcast concept throughout the rest, it is these same slides throughout. I think it makes the program look clean and professional. And I didn't pay any designer. I got these for free on the internet, but you can also pay a very small amount of money to get a really nice looking template. And that's what I think is most important about this video moment we're having, is just people want the value. They do not care if you have a beautifully created slide deck. And also, let's say you do grow and your course blows up and you have so many students, you can create a different version later. I think too many business owners are trying to act like they're 3 stages ahead instead of embracing what makes them, I think, really powerful as a small business owner. Like, I do a lot of things that don't scale. Every single new student who joins my programs, I send a personalized video message. And for the first probably, 6 months of the program, I also did a one-on-one call with all of them for onboarding. These are things that bigger companies cannot do. But because you're smaller, you can build that personal relationship. So I would say if you have, let's say again, those starting 5 students, that's perfect. Build personal relationships with them. Give them personalized feedback and support as they're moving through your beta program or your course. Like, that's so invaluable to get the testimonials that Haley, you mentioned earlier, and just the success stories. And just don't try to act like a bigger business. Like, you don't have to automate all the things and have this big expensive video production. You can just be one person who has your one course and that you're helping the 5 people get through it. So don't stress about all that stuff. You can act like a big business when you are a big business. That's my opinion.
I think that is such valuable advice, truly. And when you're talking about, a lot of business owners doing 3 steps ahead, you kind of miss out on the whole journey of just growth in general. And that is so important. So then when you get to a point where you can look back and just appreciate everything you went through and all the things you learned, I think that is just so important to remember.
Mm-hmm. And I also just want to stress that I believe in automation. I believe in simplifying. I believe in efficiency. So I'm not telling you to not pursue any of those choices that could help make your business easier. I just think that when you look around, it's so easy to see the success stories, the people who have been at this for 5, 10, 15 years, and to try to mimic what they're doing right now. But the strategies they're using right now are not going to be a fit for you, and that's okay. So I just want to give people maybe the permission to operate differently, to not pretend like you're a big business if you aren't a big business. Like, embrace being a new business owner. I think that transparency goes a long way with your early clients, your early students. And you can give them thanks in the form of transparently saying, this is my first time running this program, in the form of the lowest pricing you'll ever offer, in the form of personalized feedback, like we mentioned before. Like, you can give them a lot of benefits that you won't be able to offer later on. So pretending you're a big business is something I see a lot of people doing. I wouldn't recommend. Just love where you are. Love being the little business owner that you are to start, and you'll grow into bigger shoes one day.
Absolutely. Oh, there's so many valuable takeaways so far. This is amazing. Something that I'd really love to chat about, and I heard you mention this earlier, that you have the Circle community for your online courses. And that's kind of a new integration that we've launched at Teachable just within the past month and a half. And we've seen nearly 250 schools implement it. So I'd love to hear you chat a little bit about your experience kind of setting that up and kind of the impact that it's made for your business.
I would love to. So I was one of Circle's first users. I know Andy and Sid, the co-founders, they were formerly at Teachable. So we used to work together. It's a very small world, this world of helping people online. And I honestly was a little bit hesitant at first. I didn't know if I wanted to have a community because I didn't want to manage it or feel like I couldn't help everybody. But at the same time, I really felt like a big key to helping people get through my course successfully was helping them get unstuck and giving them feedback along the way. So my community is only for students, and the main functions are for me to share updates about the podcasting industry or for them to share for feedback. So they'll post their podcast artwork and then I'll offer feedback, or a script or a prep for an episode, or their pitch page for guests. They can post those in the community and then I provide feedback. But what I think is really powerful is the fact that it's not just me who jumps in. So part of the benefit to group programs, as opposed to even one-on-one experiences, is that people get to learn from each other. Like, one of the coolest things that's happened in the Wit Wire community is that my students have been on each other's podcasts and supported each other. And it's just so rewarding to see those connections forming. And within the Circle community, I've set it up in such a way that it's, it's organized. It's got the clear space where people can introduce themselves. It's got another clear space where people can get feedback on their podcast. And then we have my favorite space, which is called Celebrate, where people post when they launch their podcast or when they hit big milestones. And I think that seeing other people succeeding, people who are further along in the course, is also really powerful. Because when you only have the self-paced Teachable course, helpful as it is, it's sometimes hard to feel like there's any momentum. And to the best of my ability, I really wanted to create the experience that you could have if you were in a classroom. That was my roots, was teaching in person at General Assembly. And you just see that when one person raises their hand and they ask a question, it helps the whole group. So that's why I do weekly group coaching calls. That's why I do the community. And I think as the program continues to grow, those personalized elements of the program are what will help people actually get to that end goal, like I said before. So I really am not trying to be a big walking fangirl for Circle, but having that experience, and not having it be a Facebook group is really important to me too, because I am not the biggest fan of Facebook. I find it—
Me too.
yeah, I just find it really overwhelming. And even if you're in a valuable group, I feel like you don't even see the most valuable parts. And my brain works in like folders and organization. And that's a big reason why Circle was more appealing to me, was because you get to really organize your experience. And I think that being in control over what gets said in which channels and how people can connect to each other is a better way to really guide the experience, instead of just having one wall where people can kind of post whatever and do whatever they want. So, I was going to say no shade on Facebook, but like, honestly, a little bit of shade on Facebook. I just don't feel like it's a conducive learning environment. And so having this separate space that is only for my students and that is only focused on their podcast has been huge.
Definitely. And just the fact that they all get to work through it together, they get to really serve as advocates, not only for your brand, but for each other, and to just have that sense of, community. Obviously, it's a community, but to have those tight-knit connections really changes, I think, the experience that your students get to have while they're going through it.
It does. Just the feeling that they're not in it alone is huge. And when you see other students posting and you can offer feedback, I feel like the karma comes back around, and then you get feedback from other students, the connections that you make. I also do something kind of fun in my community where students can earn badges. So when they launch their podcast, they earn a little microphone badge. And when they hit certain download counts, then they can earn more badges. And I know it's so small. To me, the little things add up though. And just the feeling of success of completing a section of the program, or publishing your trailer, or launching your podcast. These are things worth celebrating. And I think it feels really nice to have other people celebrating with you. So I've just really enjoyed the community. From a businesswoman standpoint as well, the amount of testimonials that I get within the community is off the charts, because people are not only saying kind things about my program, but also telling other students kind things about the program. Like in the introductions channel, I always have people say hi and tell us a little bit about themselves and post a picture so that we can start to get to know each other. And other students will jump in and say, oh, I'm from there too. You're going to love Melissa's program. And every time I see that, I get the little heart eye emojis in my head. Like, it's such a nice feeling. So I feel like it's a really productive, encouraging space that holds more people accountable. And in, an internet world where there's a lot of noise, it's nice to feel like you have one little space that is just for you and just for the one outcome that you're trying to achieve.
Definitely. And I think that's also really important to have that the space off of Facebook, just off of social media in general. And this is not a knock against social media. This is what I do for a living. But having that separate space, as you said, that totally private community that is not associated with social media at all is so important for people to just have the opportunity to disconnect from that world for a little bit and just have this be their main focus. They have this group of peers that they're all working together with. And I just think it's a really nice change of pace.
Mm-hmm. And I would say I'm using mine for my paid students only, but you could, of course, include a free element to the community where maybe they unlock other parts when they become a paid student. Just the amount of creative things that you can do with Circle, I think, is really fun. So yeah, again, I do sound like a billboard. I swear, Andy and Sid did not put me up to this. I'm just a fan. I think that also the pandemic has helped more people want to connect online. And even though, the world is continuing to evolve, I think that now more of us do turn to these types of online communities to build connections. And I don't think that that's going to go away. So I definitely think that the future of online courses is not going to be as straightforward as watching a series of videos. I think that the creators who are going to find success are the ones who find ways to not only make personal connections with their students, but also to help students connect with each other. Like, how powerful that I have this whole community of podcasters and they're all looking for guests, and some of them can find each other within that space. Like, to me, that's so cool and inspiring as the creator of the Wit Wire community. I don't know. It's just really humbling at times to realize that you can really have an impact on people's lives. And I think connecting them to each other is maybe one of the biggest successes that I feel my business has had so far.
Oh, definitely. I think just the fact that it can be so mutually beneficial for quite literally everyone involved is probably the most amazing thing to see. And, I want to transition just a little bit. We've talked so many amazing things about your business and trends and advice, but something that we really like to focus on here at Teachable is taking a holistic approach to our creators. One of our brand values is being their business partner. And that goes so much further than just on a professional level. That really goes deep into their personal lives. Like, how is your mental health doing? How are you taking care of yourself outside of the work? So I want to ask you, entrepreneurs can frequently experience burnout and just exhaustion. And I'm really curious to know, how do you practice self-care?
It's a big question. And obviously, I've already shared that when my jobs were overlapping and I had 2 full-time jobs, not really a part-time and a full-time, I had 2 full-time jobs, it was a lot. And I knew in the moment it was temporary. And there's a book by John Acuff called Finish that has been really helpful for my mental health as a business owner. He's an author, and he says that when he's writing a book for 3 months, he just kind of intentionally chooses things to bomb. Those are his words. Like, he jokes that he has clean clothes and they sit on a chair, but while he's writing a book, they just don't get folded. But because he's given himself permission in advance, he doesn't feel guilty about it. And to me, that's been so helpful, because before, if I like to do yoga. That's a big part of my mental health and well-being. If I didn't go, I felt really guilty. But during those 2 months when I had so much going on, I just gave myself permission to bomb yoga, to not go. And I knew I would go back afterwards. And it felt so freeing, because then I didn't carry around this feeling like, oh, I should have gone, because I had already decided in advance that it was okay if I didn't. And that it was temporary. It wasn't that I was saying goodbye to yoga forever. It was just a short amount of time where I had too much going on. So I would say, as a small tip, definitely I would recommend the book, Finish, but just imagining to yourself, what can you temporarily say you do not need to focus on? It'll come back later, but you can't do everything at once. I think that's been a big part of it. And even with business too, we talked earlier about how you're not going to be choosing between a good idea and a bad idea. It's all good ideas. And you're going to feel like you want to do so much with your business. But as humans, I think we vastly overestimate how much we can do. At Teachable, I was, a marketing team leader. I was managing teams, and I was a project manager and an event producer before that.
All the things.
And a podcast producer, of course. And in all of those roles, I've just learned that time and time again, we are bad at guessing how long something takes. We think it takes 5 minutes. Secretly, It takes 50 minutes. And so I always triple whatever people tell me. They're like, oh, it'll take me 15 minutes. I'm like, I'll see you in an hour. But, but the way that you can apply that to your business or your new podcast, your new course, whatever your new project might be, is just to underestimate what you can get done in a day or a quarter. Like if you wanted to launch a course this quarter, I would say your podcast can wait. If you wanted to do a YouTube channel, I would say your course can wait. You can do everything, but you can't do everything at once. So I would say decide what is the most important big project and then put everything else in the column of great ideas, but not for now.
Definitely. And I just think it's so important, as you said, to give yourself permission to literally be a human being. We cannot do everything at once, and it's okay if you have to push things to the side so you can concentrate on something else, and just know and trust yourself that you will get to it. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so, so grateful that you joined me for the very first episode of season 3, the first episode that I have done as a podcast host, I guess I can call myself now, which is surreal to say. So kind of before we close this out, where can people connect with you online?
So you can find me online at Wit Wire. And I do hope that you'll go back to the previous few seasons of Everything is Teachable. You'll hear my voice. It'll be a fun turn of events if this is your first episode to realize I used to be the host and producer of this show. But I will say, if you are interested in launching your own podcast and you aren't sure what goes into it and you want to learn a little bit more about the process, I do have a free masterclass called How to Launch a Podcast in 60 Days Without Feeling Overwhelmed. And you can save your spot for free at witandwire.com/EIT, which is short for Everything is Teachable.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And before we hop off, are there any last words of wisdom or inspiration that you'd like to share for our listeners today?
You know, it's funny. So since I used to host this show, I always ended with that question. And the most common answer I get is just do it. And I think that that's great advice. But I would say, kind of thinking about our earlier conversation, I would say the best thing that you can do right now is to decide what feels good for the next few months instead of just going out there and trying to solve everything overnight. It's better to do something that feels a little imperfect, because if you hit record and it's your first time doing a course, your first time doing a podcast episode, it's going to feel really uncomfortable. And I would just say, know that everyone feels uncomfortable. It's not just you. And I have seen so many creators over the years I've been in this space. And I think that what the most successful creators all share is that they were consistent about showing up and they weren't afraid to change over time. So instead of trying to figure everything out today after this episode, just figure out, what do you want to do this month? What's one small thing that you can focus on next, and just see where it takes you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The small actionable steps, that's the key. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this episode today.
Yeah, keep it simple and you'll find success in time, I promise.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa, so much. And I am just so excited for everyone to listen to this episode. And I'm really excited to see how many people keep in touch with you after this.
Yeah, a huge thank you for having me, and I will consider the baton passed.
This podcast is produced by Teachable, your go-to platform for course creation. Since 2014, we've helped more than 100,000 creators earn over $1 billion from online courses and coaching products. How do we do it? By managing all the logistics, like coding and payment processing, to make it easier than ever for you to share your knowledge online. To learn more, visit teachable.com.